My name is Ian, and my sobriety date is August 28th of 2015, which means today, 6 years ago, was the last day that I shot heroin. And it's funny to say now, but back then it wasn't so glamorous. Last time I did heroin was in the bathroom of the LAX airport, right before I actually went to Utah to go to yet another treatment center. And I remember, at this time I went through 6, 7 inpatient rehab facilities. I went through more sober livings than I could count, and more detoxes than I care to remember. And I remember looking at this heroin and this needle, and I just remember thinking, like, there's no such thing as one more. Because that was my thing. My thing was always, I just need one more. I just need to not feel anymore. I just need to just not be sick, and then I can worry about getting off drugs after this one more. And that was the tale I would tell myself. And then looking at this thing, I remember specifically just, there's no such thing as one more. Backing up, I'm from Santa Barbara, California. If anyone knows where that is, it's a very nice area of California. It's where we say the rich go there to pretend to be normal people, right? Loving family. They got divorced when I was really young, when I was around 7. But, my dad moved down the street from my mom. Very loving family. I didn't want for anything, but as long as I can remember, I never felt okay. There's something always just off about life. I always felt like everyone got the pamphlet on how to do life except for me. It's just everyone was able to do life, in my perspective, so effortlessly. And it made me angry, very resentful, even as a little kid. And I was like, why is everyone's getting girlfriends and getting A's in school, and they're doing all these things so well, and why do I seem to struggle? And that's when I was 12 or 13, I found marijuana. And I remember, I did the DARE classes, I did all that stuff. And I remember the first time I smoked pot, and when I was 12, 13 years old. And I just thinking, like, how I kept thinking, how is this bad if it makes me feel so good? Instantly when I tried it, my anxieties were gone. I didn't care what people thought about me. I felt normal for the first time in my life. I had reached the mountaintop. And so I figured every adult was lying to me about substances. And then eventually I got into selling weed when I was 13. Because I didn't have a lot of friends, and I was full of resentment as a young kid. Just angry for no reason. I was pissed off at the friends I did have, because they weren't the cool kids. And then all the cool kids out there, I was pissed off at them because they didn't want to be my friend. But then when I started selling pot, everyone wanted to be my friend. I got invited to all the parties, all the girls wanted to hang out with me. I had more money than a 13-year-old knows what to do with. And I was like, wow, this is social structure. This is my peer group social structure right here. I had reached the mountaintop again. And I got invited to all the parties and all the fun stuff. And then I remember I was at a party, and a buddy of mine had some Vicodin, or some form of painkiller, I don't remember. And no, it was Dilaudid, actually. A very high, powerful painkiller for anyone out there who doesn't know. And I tried it, and that was the mountaintop. That was my Mount Everest. See, the painkillers for me did something for me that nothing on this planet could have done. Not only did it take my physical pain, which I had none, but it took my pain away, but it also took my spiritual pain away. It took that inside pain away, where I felt like I could take a deep breath for the first time in my life. The average person, when they take that sigh of relief after a hard day's work or something like that, I felt that when I took painkillers and opiates. Just that sigh of relief that I could breathe again. And I wanted more of it. And I never wanted that feeling to end. I've accomplished a lot of things in my life. So I actually went to England to study abroad. I studied at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. When I was 21, I was working at a production company in Los Angeles for a while. I got great grades. I was an academic decathlon, come from a great family. I've accomplished a lot of things in my life. I backpack across Europe. None of that stopped me from being homeless in downtown Los Angeles. The disease of addiction and alcoholism doesn't care where you come from, doesn't care what color you are, what religion you are, how much money you have. It doesn't care. None of it stopped me from being homeless in downtown Los Angeles. Moving forward, I had to do certain things in order to be part of that lifestyle. I linked up with some people who were, eventually I got fired from the production company. I wonder why. They usually don't like people showing up to their offices high on heroin. And the progression from painkillers to hardcore street drugs was fairly easy. My life is filled with me saying, I'll never do that until I do it. I'm doing painkillers, but at least I'm not shooting heroin. I'm smoking heroin, but at least I'm not shooting it, right? All right, I'm shooting heroin, but at least I'm not homeless, like I'm not a bum on the street. All right, I'm a bum on the street, but at least I'm not panhandling. All right, I'm panhandling, but at least I'm not robbing people. Well, I'm robbing people, but there's worse people out there than me, I promise. The progression is just... People look at the disease of addiction as a moral failing. And I highly suggest to those people to do some more research on what they're dealing with. As an interventionist, as a addiction specialist, today anyways, in hindsight, I look back and I see a bunch of people who are suffering. And with that suffering comes bad behaviors, not necessarily a moral failing. Everyone's doing something they think they need to do to survive. And that's exactly what I did. I was hooked up with some pretty crazy characters in Los Angeles, and I became a drug mule for them. I was driving people around. I had a clean driving record at the time, so they loved me. No, I wasn't able to be racial profiled because I was white. I was able to move in and out of areas, and I got so calm with it. There were points where I'd be having a lot of substances in my vehicle, and a cop would roll up next to me, and I would just be so brazen, I'd ask him to roll down his window, be like, "Excuse me, sir, do you know where the freeway is?" Because I was just had that mentality of untouchable. I couldn't die. And in the back of my mind, I think I wanted to die. I wanted to be caught, to stop what I was doing, because I didn't know how to ask for help at this point. My family wanted nothing to do with me, in and out of treatment centers. I stole money from them, everything. Of course they wanted nothing to do with me. And a lot more pain involved in that as well. Finally, I'm trying to skip a lot of the gory details because, in my opinion, they don't really matter. Pain is pain regardless. I know people who are billionaires, right, who have the amazing house, the wife, the kids, 10 cars in their garage, and they are depressed, and they are dying on the inside, and they will probably kill themselves. That's the same kind of emotional pain that the person on the street suffering from a substance abuse disorder, it's all pain, and people focus too much on the lifestyle and not necessarily the inner turmoil that comes with substance abuse and mental health issues. You know, that's the thing that allows people to help other people, is the relatability. Everyone knows what it's like to feel powerless, to have your world ripped from you and there's not one single thing you can do about it. You know, whether it's losing a job, losing a child. Everyone knows what that feels like. To give a background, I remember no one wants to be high. I didn't want to be high. I didn't want to continue the way I was living. And I tried so hard to do this on my own. And I even graduated one of the 6 treatment centers I went to. You know, I normally I would just get kicked out all the time, but I remember I graduated from one and I was doing great. And I had a job, I had a car, I had a girlfriend at the time, and I had my own apartment. Like, things were going great. But I wasn't doing anything to maintain my recovery, my lifestyle. I wasn't doing anything. And that's usually what the main cause of relapse is with people, is what I assume. Is because they think, oh, I've stopped abusing substances for X amount of time. I'm good, I'm normal. Which in some cases, some people are. I know a bunch of people who had substance abuse issues and they quit for small periods of time and they were able to drink normally or smoke a little bit of pot on the side and their lives were good, which is great. If they can live that lifestyle in peace and happiness and success, that's fine. For me, that's not the case. I was, 6 months sober back then at that time, job, girlfriend, car, blah, blah, blah. And I woke up one day and I hated me. On paper, my life was good. Job, girlfriend, car, blah, blah, blah. On paper, my life is good, but that's not my problem. My problem isn't substances. My problem is living. I have a problem living sober. It doesn't take much to knock me out of that. It really doesn't. And I remember I woke up in a bad mood and I said, screw it. I got to get high. And I remember I'm crying driving to the dope man's house. I'm crying, just please, God, help me get into a car accident so I don't go through with this. Help me get into a car accident, have the cops pull me over. Meanwhile, the entire time I'm thinking all this, I'm driving the speed limit. I am obeying every stop sign and everything to make sure I don't get into an accident and don't get pulled over. But that's addiction. My insides do not match my outsides. That is depression and addiction, and that's the root cause of it. And then I even remember a buddy of mine called me, and he's like, man, I had the weirdest feeling that I should call you. Is everything okay? And instantly the tears stopped. Yeah, dude, I'm fine. I'm actually meeting up with some friends right now, and things are great, man. Yeah, my life is wonderful. Hey, bro, I'm actually driving and I can't talk on the phone. It's illegal to talk on the phone when you're driving. So I'll have to call you later. But I love you. Thanks so much for checking up on me. And I hung up on him and I went to go get high, and I got high. And then the second I put that substance in my body again, for that split second, I had that sigh of relief that I was talking about, that deep breath, that everything was going to be okay. And it didn't last very long. And then I was off and running again. I was getting high at work, and eventually, I've never been fired from a job. Maybe I've been let go, but I've never been fired from all the jobs I've worked at. I just never showed back up. There are probably checks waiting for me all over California because of I just don't show up. That's one of the things I learned when I got sober, was my life was filled with dualities. I wanted to be an honest man, but I couldn't stop lying. I wanted to be a man of integrity, but I didn't do any integral acts. All my wants never lined up with my actions. That was my problem. I wanted the American dream. I wanted the nice house, the good wife, the kids, the great job, right? All of it. I wanted all of those things, but I could never show up to work. So why would anyone put faith in me to have a good salary paying job with benefits? I couldn't stop lying, so why would a woman want to be with me if I couldn't be a proper partner? And I couldn't stay sober long enough to have meaningful relationships in my life. So without those things, like, how can I have my wants when my actions wouldn't line up with that? That was one of the biggest realizations when I got sober, was it was me the whole time. I constantly blamed everyone for everything. If my teachers were nice to me, if I had more friends, my parents didn't get divorced, and my life was so distorted by anger, by resentment. I was never good enough for my mom, which is why I turned out the way I was. If my dad didn't abandon us, that's why I was the way I was. If I was just one of the popular kids, my sister would want to hang out with me more. If these jobs would just give me a shot, I promised I could prove myself. My mom, her dad left when she was very young. She grew up very poor, and she worked her hiney off to get where she was today. She's a nurse practitioner, right? She wanted more from me because she didn't want me to have the life that she had growing up. My dad didn't abandon us. He just worked a lot to provide for his children. I was the one constantly ditching school to go get high, which is why my grades started to deteriorate. I got expelled in junior high for selling drugs and fighting. In high school, they got rid of me early. I was super smart, and they couldn't expel me, so they sent me to college early. I had so many opportunities in my life that I squandered because of my perception of life. And that was one of my biggest realizations when I got sober. So finally, I remember I got kicked out of another rehab. I was in a crack den in Santa Ana, California. If anyone knows where that is, parts of Santa Ana aren't the friendliest. And I'm smoking meth, crack, and doing heroin. And I remember looking in this mirror, and I could hear something crack inside of me. Like, I felt this breaking. And I remember I called my sister, and I was like, any other time I would call a family member, I'd be crying, like, please help me, crocodile tears, manipulation, please, I'll do anything, just save me, right? I remember this so specifically. I was talking with my sister in the most monotone voice ever. I was just like, hey, I need to get out of California. I need you guys to send me to Alaska or something, because I can't do this anymore. I don't know how to live, and I don't know how to die. I don't want to die, but I don't know how to live. And she heard that in me, that something was different. Something that only the dying can comprehend, the suffering. And she called my parents, and she was like, yo, Ian needs help. And they're like, yeah, he does. Like, we're not doing this again, We're setting our firm boundaries, which I'm so grateful that they did. But she, made it very plain that no, like, something is different. I heard it in his voice, something's different. So my dad picked me up, and I detoxed cold turkey at his house. Detoxing cold turkey off crack, meth, and heroin is not fun. It's being so sick you can't sleep. And then being so tired you can't move. And putting it delicately, liquid coming out of every portion of your body. And you can't keep any food down. And you're just constantly, your bones ache. I remember punching my legs because I wanted the pain to go away. Counterintuitive, but it actually helped. And then finally they said, you're going to Utah. go to treatment out there. And I said, where's Utah? But I didn't care. I was like, sure, send me to Utah. And so I spent 7-8 days detoxing before they could get me into treatment. But like any junkie, of course, anyone who has a substance abuse issue, I got high before I left. And you would think the knowledge, knowing that everything that drugs have ever taken from me, everything I gave freely away for them, all the pain and hate and anger that it caused me, that, oh man, the drugs are out of your system now, you should be fine. That is the difference between a person dabbling in substances and a full-blown addict or alcoholic, someone suffering from a substance abuse issue disorder. The substance doesn't matter. It's not the substance. If drugs and alcohol are the problem, just stop doing drugs and alcohol. Problem solved, right? I know scores of people who have stopped doing them just to start doing them again. It's a coping mechanism issue. It's a living issue. That is the issue. So I got high again, and bringing us full circle, 6 years ago today. When you say it, yeah, it's like just kind of hitting me. 6 years ago today was the last day I did heroin. And then I flew out to Utah, and I don't know if it was the rehab I went to or if I was just ready. But it made a difference because when I went here, everyone was serious about getting sober when I went to this last treatment center. Most of the time I would go into a treatment center, and I'm definitely guilty of this before. You know, I'm constantly talking about drugs and how I want to get high in a rehab setting, and everyone else hears that, and we all like get together to form some nefarious plan to sneak drugs into the rehab facility. And I'm not proud of that, but that's just, you know, that's just who I am. When I got to this facility, I was serious, and 90% of the other people in that facility were serious, to the point where I remember that someone brought, you know, drugs into the facility, and everyone in there immediately told on him and said, get this dude the heck out of here. You know, part of me is from that old lifestyle where we don't snitch, you know, we don't tell on people and stuff like that. But I was so sick of that street mentality, that rhetoric, that blind rhetoric that was keeping me sick for so long that I didn't care anymore. You know, I didn't care. I wanted to live, and I was going to do everything I could